6 income levels, 6 completely different retirements. And the advice that works for the person at level 5 will actually break the person at level 2. That is the thing nobody tells you when you are sitting down with a retirement calculator or reading a generic personal finance article. They give you the same playbook. Save more, delay Social Security, do not touch your 401k, as if every retiree is playing the same game. They are not. The Federal Reserve tracks retirement income and wealth across the country, and what the data shows is not a single average retiree. It shows 6 distinct groups, each with a completely different set of vulnerabilities and a completely different set of moves that actually work. The better question is not, am I saving enough? That question is too vague to be useful. The better question is, which level am I at right now, and what is the one move I can make in the next 5 to 10 years to jump to the next one? I used to think that if you had $1 million saved, you were set. Then I ran the numbers on someone with $900,000 in their 401k, no pension, no real income plan, and watched them panic sell during a 20% market dip, locking in losses that took years to recover from. The number on the statement does not tell you the whole story. Your income architecture does. We are going to walk through all 6 levels today, from the most fragile to the most secure. For each one, we are going to show you the one move most advisors miss, starting with the level where a single mistake can end your retirement before it actually begins. If you have ever looked at your retirement savings and wondered whether it is enough, subscribe. That question is exactly what this channel exists to answer. Level 1 is pure Social Security. For the average retired worker in 2026, that is roughly $1,976 per month, about $23,700 a year per person. For a couple where both spouses worked, it is around $47,400 combined. For a single earner household, you are looking at closer to $24,000 to $30,000 total, depending on the spousal benefit. In most parts of the country, that number barely covers housing, utilities, and food. Level 2 adds some savings, a small IRA or 401k, typically somewhere between $100,000 and $400,000. On paper, that sounds like real progress. In practice, it creates a trap that the Save More crowd almost never talks about: the liquidity problem. Here is how it plays out. The furnace breaks in December. The car needs a new transmission. The retiree has no separate cash reserve. Their 401k is the only bucket they have, so they pull $5,000 out, and that $5,000 is now ordinary income. It can push them into a higher tax bracket, and depending on their total income, it can trigger IRMAA surcharges that raise their Medicare premiums for the entire following year. One unplanned expense creates a tax and insurance problem they spend 2 years cleaning up. The competitor framework calls Level 2 reactive, a result of bad habits and poor planning. I push back on that. The average 401k balance for workers between 55 and 64 was $256,000 in 2025, according to Fidelity. These are not people who did not care. Many of them raised families on one income, helped parents through illness, sent kids to college. They did the best they could in a system that was not designed around them. If you are at level 1 or 2, you are not failing. You are navigating a structure that made it hard to save and even harder to stay liquid. The shame is misplaced. The strategy is what needs to change. The specific strategy here is not complicated, but it requires starting before you retire. The goal is to build 1 to 3 years of basic living expenses in a separate cash account, a high-yield savings account, short-term T-bills, or a money market fund, not in your 401k. Separate. Why does this matter? Because when the market drops, and it will drop, you spend from the cash account, not from your investment account. Your portfolio gets time to recover. Your taxable income stays manageable. You never make a panic withdrawal that cascades into higher taxes and higher Medicare premiums. The mini-math on this is simple. If your monthly expenses are $3,500, 3 years of coverage means $126,000 in a separate liquid account. If you are still working, that is roughly $1,050 a month in savings over 10 years, on top of your regular retirement contributions. It is not a small number. But the alternative is pulling taxable income from a 401k at the worst possible time, in the middle of a market decline, while your Medicare premiums are rising. And here is where it gets interesting. Level 2 is fragile, but it is also the level where one deliberate move can jump you to level 4. Not level 3. Level 4. The move is only available while you still have a paycheck. Most retirement advice assumes you are already retired. The 6-level framework is essentially a snapshot. Here is what retirees look like, based on their income and assets today. But if you are between 55 and 65, you are not in a snapshot. You are in the most financially powerful window of your life. The moves you make right now, while you still have earned income, can permanently shift your income level in ways that are simply not available once you stop working. There are 3 specific levers, and I want to walk through each one carefully. The first is catch-up contributions. Once you turn 50, the IRS allows you to contribute more than the standard 401k limit. In 2026, the standard limit is $23,500. The catch-up for most savers adds another $7,500, bringing the total to $31,000 per year. Over 10 years, that is $75,000 in additional contributions alone, before any investment growth. In a market that has historically returned around 7% annually in real terms, those extra contributions compound meaningfully. The second lever is eliminating your mortgage before retirement. A lot of people carry a mortgage into retirement because they want to preserve liquidity or keep the tax deduction. That reasoning makes sense during your working years. In retirement, a $1,800 monthly mortgage payment is a structural expense that does not go away, cannot be negotiated, and does not care whether the market just dropped 30%. Paying it off before you retire reduces your required monthly income by roughly $21,600 a year. That is the equivalent of dropping your spending needs by a full income tier. The third lever is a deferred income annuity, purchased at age 60. This is one of the least discussed tools in retirement planning, and one of the most powerful for people without a pension. A deferred annuity purchased at 60 begins paying out later, typically at age 75 or 80, which is exactly when portfolio depletion risk is highest. A $100,000 premium at age 60 can generate roughly $1,800 to $2,200 per month, starting at age 75, depending on your state and the product terms. That guaranteed floor at the back half of retirement reduces the pressure on your investment portfolio to keep performing. I remember working through the numbers with a couple, both 59, with $500,000 in their 401k. The husband had a physically demanding job. He was not going to make it to 65. They had convinced themselves they were permanently stuck at level 2. We modeled all 3 levers together. Catch-up contributions through 62. A plan to pay off the mortgage in 3 years. a deferred annuity purchased at 60. By age 62, their projected retirement income had jumped 2 full levels. They did not need a pension. They just needed a 5-year plan. This is the kind of shift that most calculators will not show you, because most calculators only model what you already have. The transition window is about what you can still build, and it closes when you stop working. Level 3 is where most people think they have finally made it. But there is a hidden vulnerability in Level 3 that does not show up in Year 1. Level 3 is the retirement income picture most people imagine when they think about real security. Social Security plus a pension, or possibly an annuity. Coming in every month, guaranteed for life. No sequence of returns risk. No exposure to market swings. Just a check that shows up regardless of what the market does that morning. The 6-level framework calls this more secure than many millionaires, and structurally that is true. Guaranteed income is genuinely valuable, but there is a hidden vulnerability in Level 3 that does not show up in Year 1. It shows up in Year 15. Fixed pensions do not adjust for inflation. Social Security does. The annual CORA adjustment ties the benefit to the Consumer Price Index. But a pension check issued in 2026 will be the same dollar amount in 2041 and in 2050. The number does not change. Only what it can buy does. At 3% average annual inflation, a historically moderate assumption, a $40,000 pension in 2026 will have the purchasing power of roughly $22,000 by the time you reach age 87. You will still receive $40,000 deposited in your account. But that $40,000 will pay for what $22,000 buys today. Groceries, utilities, insurance, medications, all of it keeps climbing. The pension check does not. This is not hypothetical. People who retired with a fixed pension in 2008 watched Social Security benefits receive several meaningful CORA adjustments over the following years, including larger adjustments tied to the high inflation period of 2021 and 2022, while their pension check stayed exactly the same. Two income streams, both described as guaranteed, behaved completely differently under the same economic conditions. And the longevity numbers make this more serious. According to SSA actuarial data, a 65-year-old man today can expect to live an additional 18.6 years on average. A 65-year-old woman, an additional 21.3 years. For a married couple, there is a 50% probability that at least one spouse will live past 92. That is 25 to 30 years of inflation silently shrinking a fixed income stream. And most people do not think about what their fixed pension covers at 85 versus what it covered at 65. Level 3 is not a bad place to be. But if your pension has no cost of living adjustment, and you have no plan for the second half of retirement, you are not as secure as you feel today. Nobody told you that the pension check that feels generous now will feel thin when you are 85. That is not your fault. It just needs to be part of the plan. The resilience path looks like this. Use a portion of your IRA or savings to buy an inflation-adjusted income annuity or ladder annuity purchases every 5 to 7 years, so your guaranteed floor rises over time. Keep a separate growth account in equities to cover what the fixed pension cannot. The guaranteed floor does not have to stay static, but it will only rise if you structure it that way intentionally. Now let's talk about Level 4. This is where the emotional dynamics get complicated, and it is the level with the biggest gap between how people feel about their money and what their money can actually do. If you have spent 30 years putting money into a 401k, watching every paycheck, skipping vacations, brown bagging lunch so you could max out your contributions, and you do not have a pension, this section is about you. The 6-level framework positions pension holders at level 3, describing them as more secure than most millionaires. That framing creates an identity problem for a lot of people. Workers with $800,000 or $1 million in a 401k look at that language and feel like they are at level 4 at best, like they missed the boat, like they do not have the real thing. I have sat across from people with $1,200,000 in savings who felt poor. Not careless, poor. They looked at a neighbor with a teacher's pension and thought they had lost. The feeling was real. The math did not support it. Here is what the comparison misses. Many public pensions pay $3,000 per month with no cost of living adjustment. The approach available to a 401k saver, using a portion of savings to buy a single premium immediate annuity combined with delaying Social Security, can generate a guaranteed income floor that matches or exceeds what many pensions pay. And unlike a fixed pension, you can build in inflation protection. Let me run the numbers on a realistic scenario. You have $1 million in a 401k. At age 65, you use $200,000 to purchase a single premium immediate annuity. Based on current market rates, that generates roughly $1,100 to $1,300 per month. Call it $1,200. For life, starting right away. You delay Social Security to age 70. At 70, your benefit is about 24% higher than if you had claimed at full retirement age, which translates to roughly $3,000 to $3,100 per month, depending on your earnings history. The remaining $800,000 stays invested. At a 4% annual withdrawal rate, that generates $32,000 per year. Add it up at 70. $14,400 from the annuity, $37,200 from Social Security, $32,000 from the portfolio. That is just over $83,600 per year, solidly at level 5, from a starting position that felt like level 4. The bias that trips people up here is pension envy, combined with the feeling that a large investment account is somehow less real than a guaranteed monthly check. The pension holder has one source of guaranteed income, and it feels permanent. The 401k saver sees a big number that could theoretically go to zero, and that feels fragile. But the 401k saver has flexibility the pension holder does not. The ability to adjust withdrawal rates, do Roth conversions in low-income years, and leave remaining assets to heirs. The pension is locked in permanently. Neither is automatically better. They are different structures with different trade-offs. I have been close to this feeling myself. There were years when I looked at what a defined benefit pension would have meant and thought the other side looked better. Then I built the comparison side by side. The gap, most of the time, was much smaller than the feeling suggested. The status quo bias is powerful. But the numbers tell a different story than the feelings do. Once you cross into level 5, the enemy changes. It is no longer inflation. It is no longer having enough income. It is something more invisible, the tax code working quietly against everything you have built. At level 5, the financial math has largely worked out. You have significant assets, probably more than $1 million, multiple income streams, and you are not lying awake at night, worrying about whether you can pay the bills. The planning conversation at this level is completely different from the one at level 2 or 3. At level 5, the question is not how to generate income. The question is how to keep the government from quietly taking a percentage of everything you have built. The mechanism here is IRMAA, the income-related monthly adjustment amount. Most retirees have never heard of it until they get the letter. IRMAA is a Medicare surcharge that applies to Part B and Part D premiums when your modified adjusted gross income exceeds certain thresholds. In 2026, the threshold for a single filer is $109,000. For a married couple filing jointly, it is $218,000. Cross either threshold by a single dollar and your Medicare premiums jump, not gradually, but in steps. The surcharge applies per person, per month. For a married couple, that could mean an extra $1,000 or more in Medicare costs per year, triggered by a one-time financial decision made in January. Here is the scenario that catches people off guard. A married couple, both 68, with $1,500,000 in a traditional IRA, plus $30,000 a year in Social Security and $15,000 from a small pension. Their baseline income is $45,000. They are well under any IRMAA threshold. They decide to do a Roth conversion, a smart move in principle, since traditional IRA money will be subject to required minimum distributions starting at age 73. They convert $150,000 in 1 year. Their modified adjusted gross income rises to $195,000. Still under the married filing jointly threshold of $218,000. No IRMAA triggered yet, but here is the part most people miss. If one spouse passes away, the survivor files as a single filer. Their income, Social Security, the pension, and ongoing IRA distributions may push them well over the single filer threshold of $109,000. Suddenly, what was a comfortable married income becomes an IRMAA problem the moment the filing status changes, and the surviving spouse gets the bill for the next 2 years. IRMAA is not a punishment. It is a signal that your income is high enough to require strategic thinking about when and how you take it. The retirees who trip over IRMAA are not being greedy. They simply did not know the threshold existed before they crossed it. That is a system problem, not a personal failure. I don't know every detail of your specific tax picture, but I do know that the people who manage IRMAA effectively are not always the ones with the deepest financial knowledge. They are the ones who asked about the thresholds before making large conversions or selling an appreciated asset. One planning conversation, held before December 31st, can save years of avoidable premium costs. The move at Level 5 is not to avoid Roth conversions. It is to model the IRMAA brackets before converting, stay one threshold below the line, and know in advance which line you are crossing and why. Level 6 is the top of the ladder, and the problem there is not what most people expect. Level 6 is where the financial math effectively stops being the problem. This is the range of $5 million or more in assets, multiple income streams, Social Security maximized, no debt, no financial constraints. At a 4% withdrawal rate, a $5 million portfolio generates $200,000 per year, plus Social Security on top of that. At a more conservative 3%, that is $150,000 per year. The historical success rate for a 30-year retirement using a balanced portfolio at 4% is 96%, based on U.S. market data going back to 1926. The odds of running out of money at this level are less than 5%. And yet, people at Level 6 express anxiety about retirement, too. I used to think that more money meant less worry. Then I spent time with clients who had $8 million in net worth and were paralyzed by the thought of spending. They skipped vacations they could easily afford. They calculated the cost of every dinner out, not because they were frugal by nature, but because they had spent 40 years protecting the number and had never learned how to let it work for them. The psychological trap at level 6 is what behavioral economists call mental accounting. The portfolio feels like a single finite number, a large number, but finite. The idea of watching it decrease, even slightly, triggers something close to the same anxious response a level 2 retiree feels when the market drops. The feeling does not scale proportionally with wealth. The reframe that actually helps is converting the portfolio number into an income flow in your mind. Not $5 million, but $200,000 a year for the rest of your life, with historically less than a 5% chance of running out, plus Social Security. That shift changes the emotional relationship with the balance. The practical structure that supports this is something some planners call a guilt-free floor, an automatic monthly distribution into a checking account labeled specifically for spending, not an emergency fund, not a savings buffer, a spending account. You give yourself permission to use that money because it arrives in a separate place and is earmarked for life, not for the future. The hardest thing about level 6 is that no one built a system for this problem. The entire financial services industry is built around accumulation. Permission to actually spend, real, guilt-free permission, is something you have to build for yourself. And here is what connects all 6 levels. There is one vulnerability that every single level shares. It does not care about your income tier, your portfolio size, or whether you have a pension, and it can drop you from level 5 to level 2 in a single year, regardless of which level you are at. Whether you have $50,000 saved or $5 million, there is one category of expense that most retirement plans systematically underestimate. A healthy 65-year-old couple retiring in 2026 can expect to spend roughly $315,000 on healthcare costs over the course of retirement. That figure covers premiums, deductibles, co-pays, and out-of-pocket expenses, and it does not include long-term care. Let that number sit for a moment. $315,000 just for the basics. According to data from Genworth, the average annual cost of long-term care in 2026 is somewhere between $60,000 and $90,000, depending on the state and the level of care needed. For a married couple, there is a meaningful probability that at least one spouse will need some form of extended care before they pass. That is potentially $200,000 to $400,000 in additional costs that most retirement models do not account for. Here is a concrete example of what happens when this lands unprepared. A retiree at level 4, Social Security plus $800,000 in an IRA. At age 72, they develop a chronic condition. Annual out-of-pocket medical costs rise to $15,000. At the same time, the market drops 25%. The portfolio is being drawn down faster than planned during a period when account values are lower. Every withdrawal locks in losses. The sequence of events takes years to recover from. Now picture the same person with 2 things already in place. A long-term care insurance policy started at 60 and a separate cash reserve of 2 to 3 years of living expenses. The $15,000 in annual medical costs is handled without touching the investment portfolio. The portfolio survives the market drop because they are not forced to sell at the worst possible time. The withdrawal rate stays stable. The difference between those 2 outcomes is not investment performance. It is whether someone thought about healthcare costs before they retired, not after. If you are still in your late 50s or early 60s, this is the window to look at long-term care coverage before any health conditions make it difficult or expensive to qualify. An HSA, if you have access to one through a high-deductible health plan, is one of the most tax-efficient ways to build a healthcare reserve. Contributions go in pre-tax, grow tax-free, and come out tax-free for qualified medical expenses. The three moves that actually change your situation at any income level are simpler than the financial industry makes them sound. After walking through all 6 levels, the practical question is what you do next. There are 3 moves that apply at every level, in different proportions depending on where you sit today. The first is to identify your guaranteed income floor. Set aside the portfolio balance for a moment. Add up only the income you will receive every month, regardless of what the market does. Social Security, pension, annuity payments. That is your floor. Now compare it to your essential monthly spending: a mortgage payment, utilities, groceries, insurance, a car payment, medications. The gap between those two numbers tells you exactly how dependent you are on your portfolio performing well every single year. The larger the gap, the more vulnerable you are to market downturns, bad health years, or a poor sequence of returns. For most people in the 55 to 65 range, that gap is bigger than they think, and it is fixable, but only while you are still working. The second lever is what I think of as the 5-year transition plan. If you are between 55 and 65, you can still make catch-up contributions to your 401k. You can do Roth conversions at a lower tax rate than you may ever see again, because once Social Security and required minimum distributions arrive, your taxable income will be higher. You can use this window to pay down or eliminate a mortgage, dramatically reducing the income you will need once you stop working. And you can purchase a deferred income annuity that starts paying out at age 75 or 80. Guaranteed income exactly when portfolio depletion risk is highest. None of these moves require starting from zero. They require doing the next best thing with what you already have, consistently, before the window closes. The third lever is the cash buffer, and this one applies at every level. 1 to 3 years of essential expenses in a separate liquid account, not in your 401k, not in stocks, not in anything that can lose value. A high-yield savings account or short-term treasury bills work well for this. This single structure eliminates the sequence of returns risk that damages more retirement portfolios than any other factor. When the market drops 30%, and over a long retirement, it will, the person without a cash buffer sells investments to pay bills. They lock in losses at the worst possible time. The person with a cash buffer waits. The market recovers. The portfolio survives. And here is something most advisors will not say directly. The cash buffer does not just protect your portfolio. It changes how you feel about your retirement. Once you have 2 to 3 years of expenses in cash, a market crash becomes an inconvenience rather than an emergency. You stop reacting to every headline. You wait. You sleep. That is the actual goal. Not a number on a statement. A retirement where the daily market noise does not feel like a personal threat. The 6 levels of retirement income are not a judgment. They are a map. Level 1 is fragile, but Social Security is more powerful than most people realize, and the right claiming strategy can add tens of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. Level 2 is where most Americans live, and the single most important move is building a cash buffer before you need it. Level 3 looks safe, but a fixed pension without a cost of living adjustment will quietly shrink over 20 to 25 years. Level 4 is where most people without pensions underestimate themselves. You can construct a guaranteed income floor that matches or beats many pensions, using the savings you already have. Level 5 is about protecting what you have built from tax and Medicare costs that compound quietly in the background. And Level 6 is about something that does not appear in any financial model: giving yourself permission to spend what you built. What all 6 levels share is this: nobody reaches them by accident, and nobody stays stuck forever if they know which move to make next. Subscribe if you want the detailed playbook for your specific level. We are going to go deep on each one: the catch contribution strategies, the Roth conversion timing, the annuity options, the IRMAA brackets, and the healthcare planning that most people start too late. In the comments, tell me where you are today. Not just the number. Tell me the part you are most worried about. I read every single one, and sometimes the most useful video we make starts with a comment that a lot of people quietly agree with, but nobody said out loud. Retirement is not about having the most money. It is about knowing which level you are at and knowing the specific move that gets you to the next one. That is what this channel is about.